Picture this. I'm hauling my horse trailer down a gravel road toward my family's ranch after 4 long months in Washington. D.C., the Texas sunset glows orange when red and blue lights suddenly cut through the horizon. 3 squad cars sit across my gate, and there she is, arms folded, smirk stretched across her face like she just won the lottery. Karen Whitmore. She's actually bouncing on her toes behind the officers, grinning like she's the star of the show. The deputy walks up to my truck, hat in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sir, we've got a trespassing complaint. This lady says you don't belong here." I glance at Karen, then at the iron sign reading White Hawk Ranch, established 1889, then back at this woman who only moved into the subdivision 5 months ago. Diesel exhaust hangs heavy in the air, mixing with sagebrush. Somewhere in the back pasture, cattle are lowing. "Officer," I say calmly, "meet the woman who just called the cops on the man who oversees every HOA in America." Karen's smile melts faster than ice cream in September. "What would you do if some HOA busybody tried to get you arrested on your own family land? Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments and let me know where you're watching from." Me back up and explain how we got here. My name is Colt Harrington. And just 4 months ago, I buried my father on this same Texas soil. His grandfather broke with a plow in 1889. Our ranch covers 2,400 acres of rolling hills, mesquite trees, and the finest cattle operation in Millfield County. But Dad left me more than land. While I was running cattle and fixing fences, I was also climbing the ranks at the Federal Housing Administration. After he passed, I got called to Washington, D.C. for a promotion, Regional Oversight Director for the Federal Housing Authority. My job? Making sure HOAs across 5 states followed the law. The irony? That knowledge was about to become very useful. While I was investigating shady HOA boards in D.C., my foreman, Clayton Briggs, was holding down the fort here at home dealing with our new neighbors from Sagebrush Estates, a glossy new subdivision advertised as authentic Western living. Translation: California transplants paying premium prices to live next to real cowboys, then complaining about the very things that make it authentic and leading the charge. Karen Whitmore is 48 years old, fresh from a bitter HOA battle in San Diego. She appointed herself compliance coordinator. Before her moving truck even left the driveway, Clayton summed her up best. "She's got the energy of a caffeinated Chihuahua, twice the bite, half the sense." Her first week, she was out there with a tape measure and clipboard, cruising past our ranch twice a day. Clayton even caught her photographing our cattle through the fence, jotting notes like she was writing a dissertation on cow manure. Complaints rolled in faster than a summer storm, certified letters about excessive odors, unsightly equipment, and livestock noise violations. Apparently, tractors were offensive, and cows mooing was breaking some imaginary peace code. Every single complaint was filed as concerned citizen reports. Translation: Karen and whatever neighbors she bullied into signing, Clayton kept me updated through scratchy calls to D.C. "Boss, this woman's documenting everything. Timestamps, our feeding schedule, measures dust, clouds, even called the county claiming our cattle road violates her property setbacks. Here's the kicker. Her house sits 50 feet from our fence. That cattle road's been there since General Travis was in diapers. But suddenly, it was a traffic hazard incompatible with the neighborhood character. When I finally came home, I had 17 complaint letters waiting for me. And my first introduction to Karen happened at Dawson's feed store. The smell of grain, dust, and leather oil hit me like a warm welcome. Then Karen cornered me in the aisle by the horse supplements, hand outstretched like we were meeting at some charity gala. "You must be Mr. Harrington. I'm Karen Whitmore, Community Standards Advocate for Sagebrush Estates." Her smile was all porcelain veneers, zero warmth. "We simply must discuss modernizing your operations to fit our neighborhood aesthetic." Behind her, old Earl Dawson pretended to stock salt blocks, clearly enjoying the show. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "this ranch has been here since long before your neighborhood was even an idea." "Oh, I completely understand the historical significance," she chirped, like she was explaining arithmetic to a child. "But times change. Property values, you know." I have connections in county planning. I'm sure we can find solutions that work for everyone." The way she said solutions told me what she really meant: surrender. That night, I sat on the porch where 4 generations of Harringtons had watched storms sweep across these hills. Lightning flickered in the distance, the air sharp with the smell of rain. Karen had already pushed the county into scheduling a neighborhood compatibility hearing. She wanted our cattle road moved, our tractors hidden, and our feeding schedule changed to fit her social calendar. I sipped my bourbon and smiled. Storms coming. What Karen didn't know, she had just picked a fight with the one man in America who could shut down her entire HOA, the single phone call. And she was about to find out. LT Herrera laughed so hard, she snorted. This woman tried to get our mariachi band arrested for cultural noise violations. She even called immigration on our gardener. Then, she filed 17 complaints about our dogs barking. The funny thing? We don't even own dogs. We have a cat. Karen's little campaign escalated quickly. She hired an expensive Austin law firm that specialized in nuisance abatement, fancy words for legal bullying. The smell of money and trouble was all over that demand letter, like overpriced cologne. They threatened lawsuits for lowering property values and demanded we stop our incompatible agricultural activities. Her obsession turned bizarre. Karen measured noise with a decibel meter during our 6 a.m. feeding routine. The beeping echoed across the pasture like a broken alarm clock. She photographed every cow pie within 50 yards of her fence. One day, Clayton caught her standing on a ladder, snapping aerial shots of our equipment yard like she was on a military mission. But the community had our back. Earl Dawson banned Karen from his feed store after she demanded to inspect delivery trucks. Dolores Vega, who runs the county's best diner, told Karen where she could stick her dress code suggestions for customers. Dolores slammed her coffee pot down with the force of a judge's gavel. This woman even complained that my chicken and dumplings smelled too ethnic, she said. In Texas, that level of audacity could choke a horse. Then the lawyers turned up the heat with an official demand: cease all cattle operations within 200 yards of residential property, relocate equipment storage, and build sound barriers for livestock. Cost estimate, $340,000. Also, a few neighbors who moved next to an active ranch wouldn't have to deal with ranch life. Karen launched a Facebook page called Millfield County Rural Reform. She filled it with glossy, professional photos of cows eating grass, framing normal ranch life as some kind of crime. The entertainment peaked when Karen measured our fence with the surveyor's rod. Bessie, our friendliest heifer, wandered over to say hello. Karen screamed like she'd seen a bear and bolted for her SUV, abandoning her expensive equipment. Clayton chuckled. "Boss, I got video of her running from a cow that just wanted to be petted." This beats cable TV. County scheduled a neighborhood hearing for next month. Karen thought her charts, graphs, and slideshow would prove our ranch was a nuisance. What she didn't know was that I'd already spoken with Marcus Webb, the county planning director and my dad's old fishing buddy. After reviewing our agricultural easement, Marcus laughed so hard coffee came out of his nose. "Colt," he said, "her complaints are meaningless. Your protections predate her subdivision by a century. But let her have her hearing. Be educational." Karen thought she was building a case. In reality, she was proving why agricultural protections exist and why HOS can't override them. Still, she doubled down. She built a website called The Local News, pushed a petition claiming ranches like ours were outdated and unfair. She even dug up our tax records and filed complaints, saying our land was underassessed. The smell of meddling hung in the air like diesel smoke on a still morning. But that's when her detective work backfired. She discovered I owned the mineral rights under part of her subdivision. In Texas, that's common. Land changes hands, but mineral rights often stay with the original families. Karen thought this gave her ammunition. She threatened to expose me for conflicts of interest. What she didn't realize was that owning mineral rights strengthened my legal position. All her noise was just documenting a pattern of harassment. Watching her dig her own hole with such enthusiasm was almost painful. My partner, Sarah Olivia, began recording Karen's harassment for a restraining order. Meanwhile, I continued my federal HOA oversight training online. The ranching community rallied behind us. The Ranchers Association offered legal funds, though we didn't need them yet. The high school FFA chapter wrote a letter of support. Even the Chamber of Commerce passed a resolution protecting our agricultural hadala res. 3 subdivision residents quietly apologized, distancing themselves from Karen's crusade. Her next move? She petitioned City Council to declare our ranch a public nuisance. What she didn't realize was that our land wasn't even within city limits. At the council meeting, the mayor smiled politely. "Ma'am, we have no jurisdiction here. You might want to check a map before filing petitions." The whole room sighed in disbelief. Still, Karen accused me of intimidating residents. Security footage of cattle grazing peacefully in the pasture. While Sarah Olivia uncovered something big. The subdivision developer had skipped environmental studies, ignoring a required 200-foot buffer zone. Karen's house sat just 50 feet from our fence, illegal from day one. On top of that, inspectors found multiple HOA violations unpermitted. Fences, drainage problems, and oversized buildings. The irony was delicious. While Karen tried to paint our ranch as the problem, her community was crumbling under its own violations. To make matters worse for her, I discovered Sagebrush Estates had received federal tax incentives, meaning their HOA fell under oversight jurisdiction. Finally, Karen held her big community meeting with Channel 7 present. She unveiled dramatic slideshows with music and graphics, detailing every supposed violation. 15 residents showed up mostly out of curiosity. I walked in uninvited but perfectly within my rights. Her face went pale. Calmly I addressed every accusation with facts and legal proof, and I said, "Mrs. Whitmore, you're asking a 150-year-old ranch to change for a subdivision built 5 months ago. Hey, that's like moving next to an airport and complaining about airplanes." And with that, the room understood exactly who the real problem was. Several residents began questioning Karen's long history of neighbor disputes. Her support vanished faster than morning dew under September heat. The county planning office soon announced a review of her subdivision's permit, compliance ironically triggered by the very complaints Karen herself had filed. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone trip over their own rope. Karen's carefully crafted media strategy was collapsing. Her legal threats proved empty. Her neighbors were turning against her. And like a cornered animal, she became even more reckless. Out of desperation, she pitched Channel 7's investigative team a sensational story. Federal employee abuses power to intimidate neighbors. She edited footage of our ranch, exaggerating dust clouds and morning feeding noise, claiming to speak for dozens of families in a fight against government corruption. But panic makes people sloppy, and her mistakes were piling up. Reporter Jake Morrison began investigating. Instead of exposing ranch violations, he uncovered Karen's trail of conflicts across 3 states. The narrative flipped from rancher terrorizes. Subdivision 2 problem neighbor targets. Long-standing agricultural operation. Morrison documented building permit violations throughout Sagebrush Estates, traced Karen's pattern of harassment, and interviewed former neighbors who all told the same story. Karen thrived on conflict when he called me. Seized the chance to explain the truth. I clarified my actual federal role in HOA oversight, not ranch inspections, and handed over records of Karen's harassment. I also mentioned my upcoming testimony to a congressional subcommittee on HOA accountability and reform. The timing couldn't have been better. Karen panicked. She tried to spin herself as a defender of community standards against government overreach. She even organized an emergency HOA meeting, pushing for new rules and a special assessment too. Fund legal action against our ranch. The meeting backfired spectacularly. Karen presented a slideshow of supposed ranch violations, with dramatic music and red arrows pointing at cattle like they were criminals. I showed up legally any county resident could attend. Anne calmly dismantled her claims one by one. When? She accused our cattle of excessive noise. I cited her own readings, 45 decibels during feeding quieter than a Saturday morning lawnmower. The room fell silent as I pointed it out. Residents began questioning Karen's lawsuits and realizing she was leading them into expensive litigation. Meanwhile, Sarah Olivia uncovered something bigger. When the original developer went bankrupt, every permit obligation worth $340,000 shifted directly to the HOA. That included environmental work, buffer zones, and sound barriers that were never built. Karen's board, not our ranch, was legally responsible. Support for Karen collapsed. One by one, her allies backed out. Bryce Kellerman quit her committee after realizing his own liability. Donna Hutchins quietly admitted she'd been misled and announced she was moving away. Things turned almost comical when Karen tried to measure our fence with a survey rod, only to be chased off by Dolly, our protective mother cow. Clayton nearly doubled over laughing. "Boss, even the livestock thinks she's a nuisance." Jake Morrison's article hit like a bombshell. Subdivision faces environmental compliance crisis, detailed violations, financial mismanagement, and potential special assessments that could bankrupt homeowners. Karen's endless complaints had triggered the very investigation that endangered her own property values. Every noise report she filed became evidence supporting our historic ranch operations. Every agency she contacted now questioned her community's failures, and then came the knockout punch. Sarah's title search revealed the subdivisions. Approval had been conditional on buffer zones, drainage systems, and environmental protections that were never completed. By law, all those obligations were now the HOA's problem. Worse still, Karen's own home violated setback rules, built 50 feet from our property line when the law required 200. Technically, her dream house was an illegal structure to top it off. The subdivision's stormwater system relied on natural drainage through our ranch. Restricting us could actually flood their neighborhood. Suddenly, the property values Karen claimed to protect were in jeopardy. The special assessment needed to fix it all was around $12,000 per household. My grandfather always said, "Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent tie their own noose." Karen had spent months gathering evidence, only to prove our ranch's rights while exposing her community's failures. The irony was almost too perfect. As regional oversight director, I had the authority to investigate HOAs that failed to meet their development obligations. If a community ignored permit violations, I could recommend state intervention. With my upcoming congressional testimony, Sagebrush Estates was shaping up to be the perfect case study for HOA accountability failures. That's when Sarah brought out the final piece of evidence. Financial records showing the subdivision's HOA hadn't filed annual reports for 2 straight years. In oversight terms, they were essentially running as an unregulated entity, while managing a development funded with public tax incentives. "Karen doesn't realize what she's done," Sarah said, organizing the documents into neat stacks. "Every complaint she's filed has actually strengthened our case. She's proven why your ranch must remain protected, while also exposing her community's violations." The truth settled in like frost at dawn. I didn't need to fight Karen directly. Her own actions would force her community to confront their real problems, while our ranch remained secure under the law. Karen believed she was David battling Goliath. In reality, she was Goliath collapsing under her own weight, while David simply stood back and watched. And to be honest, the taste of justice was sweeter than Dolores's apple pie and twice as satisfying. Her harassment campaign had triggered investigations that could either bankrupt her HOA or force them to spend hundreds of thousands fixing long-ignored issues. All I had to do was continue ranch life as usual while her house of cards crumbled. It was time to rally the cavalry. Sarah spread legal documents across her conference table like a general preparing for battle. Clayton Briggs arrived with 40 years of ranch records, proving our family's history and rights down to the day cattle first traveled that disputed road. Dolores Vega offered her diner as neutral ground, with the promise of strong coffee and a place to plan. Marcus Webb from County Planning brought the bureaucratic firepower, explaining how enforcement worked and agreeing to fast-track compliance. Reviews and Channel 7's Jake Morrison wanted exclusive access to our story. He could smell an award-winning investigation in the making. Over plates of Dolores's chicken fried steak and coffee strong enough to wake the dead, our 3-part strategy took shape. The legal track was Sarah's battlefield. She prepared a counter-complaint against the subdivision, pressed for county enforcement of the original development conditions, and organized documentation for a possible restraining order against Karen. As a last resort, I would initiate a federal HOA compliance review. The nuclear option that could suspend their entire governance. The community track required finesse. I coordinated with the Ranchers Association for unified support at the county meeting. Local families prepared testimonial stories of my father helping during the flood of '98, my grandfather donating land for the fire station in decades, of our ranch being a backbone of the community. Small businesses rallied too. Earl Dawson described how Karen's constant complaints disrupted his feed store customers. Dr. Sarah Martinez, our veterinarian, prepared statements about our high standards of animal care. Even the postmaster offered testimony about our flawless road safety record, no delivery incidents in 37 years. To top it off, we planned a $1 day at the ranch with barbecue and fiddle music, living showcase of our Western roots. And then came the federal track, my specialty. In Washington, I'd learned that any development receiving tax incentives or federal backing automatically qualified for HOA oversight. Sagebrush estates fell under that category, meaning their failures were subject to strict federal accountability. I began building data for my congressional subcommittee presentation, turning our situation into a prime example of why stronger HOA oversight laws were needed. My colleagues were especially interested in the agricultural angle. Across the country, rural families faced the same pressures from suburban sprawl. Our fight could set a precedent for protecting farmland nationwide. The economics were undeniable. Our ranch pumped $180,000 annually into the local economy feed. Vet care, equipment purchases. Clayton's security footage became powerful evidence. Karen sneaking around at dawn, photographing cattle, chasing survey lines, brassing our delivery trucks. She had turned neighborly complaints into full-blown surveillance. Environmental assessments revealed the ultimate irony. Our ranching practices actually improved soil stability and air quality compared to the subdivision's development. Even their stormwater system relied on our land's natural drainage. According to original permits, our operations weren't just allowed, they were essential. During one late-night session at Dolores's, the puzzle finally clicked. Every hostile move Karen made only built more documentation against her. Each complaint she filed sped up reviews by agencies that now saw her HOA as the true violator. The tide was turning. By the end of the month, county planning would begin. Compliance actions. Federal oversight teams had scheduled review tours in our region. The local paper planned a feature on our county's 150-year agricultural HOA. Jake Morrison's Expose was locked in for Sweeps Week, guaranteeing maximum attention. Sarah assembled our legal files with military precision. Clayton prepared demonstrations of historic ranch practices. Dolores organized community volunteers. Marcus scheduled the crucial county meeting, and Jake lined up his cameras. Then came the call that sealed it all. The congressional subcommittee officially requested my testimony, specifically asking for local case studies of HOA failures. Karen's campaign of harassment had backfired spectacularly. Handing me a national platform to fight for rural families everywhere, she thought she was waging war against us. In truth, she had built the very stage where her own downfall would play out. The taste of victory was sweeter than Dolores's famous peach cobbler. Karen thought she was battling a local rancher, but in truth, she was fighting something far bigger: federal housing policy, state agricultural protections, county planning authority, and the strength of an entire community. All we had to do was let her keep digging. While we prepared to cover the hole she was creating for herself, her desperation reached new levels. She placed anonymous calls to the state veterinarian, claiming livestock abuse, apparently believing that well-fed cattle in clean pastures counted as cruelty. She even contacted the IRS, suggesting our ranch was committing tax fraud. A laughable claim, considering we'd shown profitability and proper documentation for 3 generations. Her paranoia ran deeper. She tried bribing seasonal workers, offering cash to dig up so-called evidence. Clayton heard it from his nephew Miguel, who worked on our hay crews. Karen approached him with $50, asking if we dumped chemicals in the creek or mistreated animals. Miguel told her, "The only thing we pour on those cattle is care," and she looked at him like he was speaking another language. Her complaints kept spiraling. She filed reports with the Postal Service, claiming unsafe roads our mail carrier had safely driven for nearly 4 decades. She measured dust in the air with handheld devices, declaring it pollution when it was nothing but Texas wind carrying. Texas dirt, but the real twist came when her husband cracked under pressure. Dave had been hiding the truth from her, but the mounting bills and her obsession forced a confession captured on Clayton's security cameras through their open window. His voice carried across the night air. "Karen, we're broke. Oh, $89,000 in back taxes and legal fees. Oh, we can't afford this fight. You have to stop." But she didn't stop. Like a gambler chasing losses, Karen was too deep. In her crusade to quit, meanwhile, my investigation uncovered something much bigger. The HOA compliance review revealed over $127,000 in missing funds money meant for infrastructure. Maintenance that had been siphoned away. This meant the HOA was broke, unable to pay for required permits or compliance costs. Karen wasn't just fighting as her community was already collapsing under financial mismanagement. Her media stunts only made things worse. She went on a local radio show, claiming we'd moved in after the subdivision. The host fact-checked her live, pulling county records on air, "Ma'am. The White Hawk Ranch was established in 1889. Your subdivision was approved in 2023. That's 136 years." Park callers flooded in, siding with the ranch and sharing their own HOA horror stories. The taste of public vindication was richer than coffee on a cold morning. Pressure built fast. Subdivision residents started receiving violation notices. Their insurance company threatened to pull coverage. Families put houses up for sale rather than face looming assessments. Even the HOA board began considering removing Karen from her leadership role. Her strongest supporters abandoned her one by one. I stayed silent, steady as ever, continuing ranch operations and documenting everything. Calm consistency always beats chaos. Environmental reports delivered the final blow. Showed our ranch actually improved water flow and prevented flooding, while Karen's own subdivision depended on that. By trying to shut us down, she was endangering her neighbors. Even her allies saw it. One board member resigned to avoid liability, another moved away to escape the drama. Karen was almost completely alone, but instead of stopping, her behavior grew more dangerous. She blocked supply trucks, demanded to search our cargo, and took photos through our windows with a telephoto lens. She even stalked me to town meetings, the feed store, and Dolores's diner. When she filed a police report claiming our dogs were threat dogs fenced in 200 yards away, the deputy sighed in frustration. "Mr. White," Deputy Martinez said, "I've explained agricultural laws to Mrs. Whitmore 3 times now. At this point, she may need to consult a lawyer before filing any more complaints." The message was clear. Law enforcement was losing patience. And then came her final, desperate gamble. She hired a private investigator to dig into my federal role, convinced she'd expose corruption. She even contacted congressional representatives claiming abuse of power, and launched a crowdfunding campaign to fight government corruption. It raised a grand total of $347 in 3 weeks. Her crusade had become her cage. And the harder she fought, the tighter it closed around her. The donations trickling into her fundraiser mostly came from relatives, people who gave out of pity rather than principle. The investigation she had banked everything on exploded in her face like a faulty firework. The private investigator she hired uncovered nothing but my spotless federal service record, complete with commendations for community involvement and a history free of conflicts of interest. When congressional staff reviewed her complaints, they discovered a long trail of frivolous lawsuits she had filed in multiple states. Her credibility collapsed instantly, dismissed as nothing more than the rantings of a serial complainer. The Federal Ethics Review not only cleared me completely, but also highlighted my volunteer work with agricultural preservation programs. Karen's credibility evaporated like morning dew under the September sun. Meanwhile, the subdivision's crisis grew far worse than anyone had imagined. The county issued a formal compliance order, giving the HOA just 90 days to fix permit violations or face legal action. The HOA board voted unanimously to strip Karen of every leadership role. Realizing she had become a liability threatening everyone's financial survival, an emergency special assessment was passed $12,500 per household. Most residents didn't have the money, and with property values plummeting, borrowing wasn't even an option. 6 more families put their homes on the market. It's overwhelming supply and sinking values further. But Karen's behavior spiraled from obsession into full-blown stalking. She tailed my truck with her SUV, snapping photographs while driving dangerously close. Clayton's security cameras captured her parked outside our ranch for hours, binoculars in hand, watching our family like some deranged wildlife researcher. She harassed our customers at the feed store with wild conspiracy theories until the owner finally banned her from the property. She even created fake social media accounts, posting elaborate stories about government corruption and environmental crimes. The posts were so far-fetched that most people assumed they were satire mocking HOA extremists. At this point, legal intervention was inevitable. Sarah Olivia filed for a restraining order with thick stacks of documentation outlining Karen's escalating harassment. The sheriff's office supported criminal stalking charges, citing her progression from complaints to surveillance to direct confrontation. The county attorney took the case, and Judge Williams issued a protective order requiring Karen to stay 500 yards from our property, effectively cutting off half the county roads she had been using to stalk us. Media attention erupted when Channel 7 aired Jake Morrison's special report, "When HOAs Go Wrong, A Texas Tale." The piece focused on failed development permits, financial mismanagement, and legal obligations that threatened to bankrupt homeowners. Morrison interviewed longtime residents who praised our ranch's contributions to the community. Against that backdrop, Karen's harassment campaign looked like the ramblings of someone unhinged. National attention followed quickly. A congressional subcommittee scheduled hearings on HOA oversight reform using sagebrush estates as a case study. My testimony would highlight the failures, and suddenly, this wasn't just a neighborhood feud, it was a national conversation. About HOA abuse and accountability. Federal housing officials even announced tougher compliance requirements. Partially because of our case, Karen's personal world collapsed in the process. Dave, her husband, threatened divorce if she didn't stop. Their grown children refused to visit out of embarrassment. Neighbors avoided her completely or considered their own legal action. Even the HOA's attorney urged the board to distance themselves from her before they were dragged into liability. She was broke, isolated, and publicly disgraced all, while the ranch carried on stronger than ever. We hosted successful school field trips that showcased sustainable farming. The county fair recognized us for agricultural hadalares. Studies confirmed what we had always known. Our operations improved the local ecosystem, managed water better than the subdivision ever could, and contributed over $230,000 annually. To the county's economy, Karen's final breaking point came when she violated the restraining order in spectacular fashion. On the courthouse steps, she confronted me directly. Her voice cracked with rage as she shouted, "You destroyed my family. You used your federal position to persecute innocent homeowners." Security cameras caught every word as deputies rushed. The irony was sharp. She was arrested on the spot for violating the order, still screaming about government conspiracies. Her mugshot ran in the county paper, right next to an article praising our ranch for hadalares preservation. Additional charges piled on criminal stalking, harassment, and the restraining order violation. The woman who once tried to have me arrested for trespassing on my own land was now facing jail time herself. And I'll admit, it just as tasted. Sweeter than Dolores's apple pie and twice as satisfying. When the House Subcommittee on Housing and Community Development convened in Austin, everything changed. With C-SPAN cameras rolling, I took the witness stand, turning our small-town conflict into a national debate. Congressman Martinez leaned forward and asked, "Mr. Whitehawk, can you explain how the Sagebrush Estates case illustrates systemic failures in HOA oversight?" The irony couldn't have been more poetic. Karen had given me the perfect platform to expose the dangers of unchecked HOA power. As I testified about harassment, financial mismanagement, and regulatory neglect, millions of viewers saw how a community's harmony could be destroyed. Karen tried to attend the hearing, but Capitol Security escorted her out when she shouted accusations from the gallery. Her removal aired live on national television, cementing her image not as a whistleblower, but as an unstable extremist. The restraining order hearing later that week was the final nail in her campaign, representing herself. A poor choice, Karen delivered rambling speeches about conspiracies while Judge Williams listened patiently. Then, one by one, Sarah Olivia presented evidence. Security footage of Karen measuring fence lines at dawn, photographs of her spying on cattle, police reports of her following my truck through town. At last, Judge Williams leaned forward. His voice carried the weight of 3 decades on the bench. Mrs. Whitmore, this court finds your actions amount to systematic harassment of lawful agricultural operations. The evidence revealed a clear and undeniable pattern of escalating misconduct behavior that placed public safety at risk. The court responded with a permanent restraining order, expanding the protective boundary to 1,000 yards. Criminal stalking charges were forwarded to the district attorney. Court costs and legal fees were awarded to our ranch money Karen simply couldn't pay. Outside the courthouse, as the media storm hit its peak, national news crews filled the square as Karen held a desperate press conference that shattered the last of her credibility. She contradicted her earlier statements, accused me of controlling the government, and even blamed our ranch for destroying her family. Within hours, the video went viral. Showdowns trended nationwide, racking up 2.3 million views in a single day. Karen became a symbol of suburban entitlement gone too far. Late-night comedians mocked her obsession, cracking jokes about measuring manure piles and calling police on century-old ranches. Meanwhile, my congressional testimony carried real weight. A subcommittee quickly adopted my recommendations for federal HOA oversight, including stronger protections for agricultural operations near residential developments. New compliance requirements were introduced to ensure developments followed permit laws, preventing future Karen cases. Soon after, a $50 million federal grant was announced to protect family farms like ours from development pressure. That money safeguarded agricultural hatelaris and gave rural families the support they'd long needed. County commissioners recognized our ranch as an official agricultural hatelaris site, granting state-level protections Karen could never challenge. The local tourism board launched working ranch tours, allowing visitors to experience authentic farm life, generating new revenue while preserving history. Our property values in our area went up, not down, proving Karen's warnings had been nothing but fear-mongering. Neighbors personally thanked us for standing strong against suburban encroachment. Sagebrush Estates, on the other hand, paid the price. Their HOA was forced to comply with long-ignored permits at a cost of $380,000. The expense triggered special assessments, bankrupting 3 families and forcing 6 more to sell at heavy losses. Property values there plummeted. A new HOA board quickly implemented strict anti-harassment rules and even issued a public apology to our ranch, acknowledging the damage Karen's actions had caused. Karen's personal collapse was complete. Her home went into foreclosure from legal debts and unpaid state taxes. Her husband, Dave, filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting his own restraining order. Their adult children cut ties entirely, humiliated by her actions. She eventually fled the state, leaving behind unpaid debts and a trail of judgments. The stalking case moved forward, and to avoid jail, she pled guilty. At the same time, federal policy shifted nationwide. New laws required HOAs to disclose permit obligations to buyers, strengthened agricultural protections, and increased penalties for harassment. Oversight directors gained authority to investigate HOA abuse patterns, ensuring what happened to us would never happen again. Our case became the national model for resolving rural suburban conflicts. The true mic drop moment came during my final interview with journalist Jake Morrison. When asked about Karen's legacy, I revealed the irony that silenced the nation. She had signed documents acknowledging the ranch's agricultural easements before she ever moved in. She had agreed to everything she later tried to fight against. The courthouse square erupted with laughter as Morrison read her own signature aloud. Karen stormed off set mid-interview, her final TV appearance ending in disgrace. Justice had not only been served, it had been served with poetic irony. 6 months later, life was sweeter than honey from our ranch beehives. Harrington Ranch earned the prestigious Century Farm designation. Joining an elite list of operations surviving generations of change, our educational programs now welcomed over 2,000 students annually, letting children trade car horns for cattle, calls while learning sustainable ranching practices. Clayton Briggs, after 50 years of loyalty, was promoted to operations manager with a well-earned salary increase and extra staff to help him. Our agritourism efforts added $180,000 in annual revenue, proving people crave authentic HOA over artificial suburbia. Sagebrush. States reinvented itself under new leadership that valued cooperation. Together we launched the Ranch Hatteras, a festival raising funds for the County Historical Society and celebrating the traditions that built our community. Property values stabilized, climbing 15% above pre-controversy levels. New families moved in, not in spite of agriculture, but because of it. My testimony in Washington led to the HOA Accountability Act of 2025, a landmark law requiring transparency, forcing development obligations, and strengthening agricultural protections. The new federal grant program saved 49 family farms in its first year alone. Law schools began teaching our case as a landmark example of how solidarity can defeat harassment. Karen, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale. She pled guilty, was sentenced to counseling, and disappeared into anonymity. Joe. Training programs now cite Karen's law as a warning. Property managers across the country adopted new anti-harassment standards, using our case to protect family farms and prevent conflict. Our ranch thrived. We launched scholarships providing $50,000 annually for agricultural students, partnered with Texas A&M for sustainable ranching research, and expanded programs for hundreds of rural youth. Conservation easements ensured our land would never fall to developers. The media kept our story alive. A documentary called Fences and Neighbors won Film Festival awards. My book, When HOAs Attack Agriculture, became a bestseller. Speaking tours reached tens of thousands of homeowners, while our consulting business successfully resolved 23 conflicts across the country. On a personal level, happiness completed the circle. Sarah, Olivia, and I were married in the chapel my great-grandfather built, surrounded by family, friends, and the cattle that started it all. We adopted 2 children from the foster system, raising them on land where they'd learn the values of honesty, responsibility, and hard work. Tourism boosted the county economy. Local businesses reported 25% higher sales. Schools gained resources from new tax revenue. And agriculture-related tourism brought in nearly $400,000 each year. Big picture, change was undeniable. Federal reforms prevented 10,000 harassment cases annually, preserved 127,000 acres of farmland, gave communities mediation tools to stop conflicts before they turn toxic. Now, as the sun sets in shades of orange and purple over the pastures, I watch my children play in the ranch yard while Sarah tends her garden. Tour buses arrive for evening programs. The sheriff waves hello. Cattle graze peacefully on land that has fed families for over a century. Sometimes the best way to handle a bully is to let them defeat themselves. Property rights research. Before buying saves everyone pain later. Communities heal when good people stand together for what's right. Have you faced your own HOA nightmare? Share it in the comments. We support each other here. Subscribe for more David vs. Goliath justice stories. Don't forget to ring the bell to protect agricultural HOA with us. Next week, how I used eminent domain laws to stop a casino from destroying our town's main street. That's all for today's HOA madness. If this story of justice made your day, smash that like button, drop your thoughts below, and stay tuned, because more outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.